And what I'm going to be doing is just going through a brief overview of what it is that we're trying to achieve, and then run through a demonstration of the app. This won't be a training on how to use the app, but certainly enough to get you going. And you can, of course, download the app at any time from the Play Store or the App Store if you've got Android or iPhone. It is a global app. It works everywhere in the world. The amount and type of information you get from it will vary a little bit depending on where you are, and this is actually another opportunity for collaboration, U.S.-Canadian collaboration in the future. It was really set up, originally designed for folks that are interested in using technology but may not have either the time, the resources, the skills, the finances to tap into the big ag tech. And so it's really designed for a smaller farmer, a rancher, somebody that may not already have that big ag tech. Having said that, there are actually some functions, and I'll point those out as I go through, that anybody, no matter how big your operation, may find useful. And this map just shows the various locations where it has been used. These are actually uploads. We've had, I think, about 20,000 different plot uploads here. So what LandPKS is designed to do is quickly and easily identify soils, help you do that, provide access to soil information. It's got a really simple management record-keeping function, and then soil health and vegetation monitoring tool are integrated as well. And the ability then, of course, to back up your data in the cloud. In fact, that's pretty automatic. As soon as you hit the synchronize button on it, it automatically gets backed up on cloud servers. And graph, and in the future, we're going to be providing more interpretation information. So people often ask, well, why did you call it the Land Potential Knowledge System? That sounds like a kind of a strange name. And it's because we're really interested in helping people, producers in particular, to achieve the sustainable potential of their land. Now, that may be for crop production, it may be for forage production, it may be for wildlife habitat, it may be for all of the above. But in order to do that, we need to understand what the soils are, what the topography is, and what the climate is. So the app starts, and this isn't the whole thing, but the app starts by providing the ability to capture that information and access that information. Now, there's good reasons reaching your sustainable potential, but then there's also driven a little bit by concerns, and these are concerns that still exist around the world today. And one of the things last time I was up in Mandan was just incredibly impressed with is how quickly some of the no-till technologies are advancing. I went to Ohio State University for my PhD back in the late 80s and early 90s, and no-till was starting to come in, but it was nothing like it is today. And so I think the advances that we've made are tremendous. At the same time, there still are some soils where even no-till can be a challenge to do sustainably. And so helping to understand what that variability is, and then, as Jim mentioned earlier, managing for drought. The other challenge that we're trying to address with LandPKS is that soil maps are good, and they're really good in some areas, like Iowa, where we've got pretty detailed soil maps, and in other areas they're much more general and maybe not quite as precise. Even in a place like Iowa, these are individual soil map units which map groups of soils, but they generally list one soil as being the dominant. Well, I think you can see here they've done a fairly good job with their lines, but there's clearly some areas here that the farmer identified as being inappropriate for cultivation, and they were able to pull those out, and they pulled those out based on the observations they made at the surface of the soil. Sometimes those cues aren't quite as visible on the surface, and you actually have to dig a hole. Here's another one here. Clearly probably a wetter area that did get included in the field. but is clearly functioning quite differently. And so understanding that variability, whether you're getting it off of sensors on a tractor or with a smaller operation, or you want to do some spot checks using LandPKS to help sort through that. Just one really quick example. We have a very small, I hesitate to even call it a farm, it's really our backyard, but it is we do produce up to 10,000 pounds of pecans a year in southern New Mexico. So 4,000 kilograms or so. And was asked to bring my chainsaw over to my neighbor's place a couple of years back. And after I cut down his trees for him on request, I said, well, why'd we cut them down? He said, well, they weren't producing. I said, well, that one's producing. And he said, yeah. I said, what's different? He said, I don't know. And then I started talking to him about, well, you know, when you were digging the holes to plant those trees, what it looked like. Well, it turns out this one here was planted on a sand, and that's the one that wasn't producing. The other one was on a loam, and he was irrigating them at the same frequency. And of course, with a sand, you've got lower water holding capacity than you do in a loam. And so that every 2 to 3 weeks wasn't enough on that sand to support production. It was keeping the tree alive, but that was about it. And so understanding those really fine scale differences, even within a soil map unit, depending on the value of your crop or what it is you're trying to do, can have value. In other cases, doesn't matter so much. Again, this is just one function. We're also been focusing on the other things folks are concerned about, increasingly looking at climate change and how we're investing to adapt, to deal with the increasing frequency of droughts and so forth. And so the way that the app's set up is as a set of 4 input modules. And so this is basically places where you can record data. And then each of these input modules provides different types of outputs. And increasingly, we're starting to combine the different outputs from the different input modules to generate more sophisticated outputs. First, the one that I just focused on for the last few slides was discovering the land potential and setting targets. What's a realistic production target? What kind of carbon sequestration could we get as the carbon markets start to come online? Where do I need to put in erosion control and to keep erosion and runoff within my targets? And then using a land management module, which is a very simple record keeping tool to plan and track the management actions using a calendar. And then finally, of course, monitoring both soil health and my land cover in order to then feed back into the management. So what I'm going to do now is jump to the app itself. This is what it looks like after you've entered a few plots. You can see we take a little screenshot of the location, provide for you. And in this home screen has a number of things on it. We've got a plus button up here. We can add a plot, the home button, of course, which most apps have, a map, and so forth. And I'm going to tap on that map right now. And I've already navigated a little ways north of where I'm sitting in Colorado now. And just kind of randomly selected. Actually, I guess I could go a little further east, and I can zoom right in as far as I want on a location, or I can use the GPS on it as well. I'm going to go ahead and just zoom in and select a point here in this field. And when I tap on it, what I get for that location is the ability to create a plot or simply view the soil. So I can just go ahead and hit View Soil ID. And what you'll see here is not the Canadian Soil Survey. What you're seeing here is information we've grabbed internationally from FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, took all the soil surveys in the world and they generalized them. So this is not as precise as you'd get off of a soil survey that you'd get from the government. But it at least gives you an idea of what you can do. In the United States, what we've done with some additional funding and resources, we were able to then tap right into the US's soil survey. So if you tap a location in the United States, you'll get a very different set of information. But even here, it tells you something about the types of soils that are likely to occur in that area, that have been mapped in that area. So we've got a what's called a GRAZEM, which is and it provides little information, as you can see, on its potential productivity and what the limitations might be. And then a glaisol, okay, which is obviously a moisture limited soil. And then a Renzina, which is a shallow and rocky soil. And so they're ranked currently based on their the dominant soil in that area. We can also go in and we can create a plot. And once I create a plot, there's a whole lot more I can do here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll just call it one test one. And when I create a plot, when I was first poking at that, nothing was being saved. You were just basically exploring like you would if you went into Google Maps or something. But here I can decide whether I want to make my data private. If I want to decide to hit that button, make it private, it basically says it won't appear on the public website. If you don't make it private, your data, anything that you input, will become visible. So you can make that choice, and you can change it at any time down at the bottom of the data input screens. So if I go ahead and I make that private and I hit save, what it's doing now is it's going back out and it's grabbing from the cloud that soil information. And again, like I said, right now for Canada, it's currently just this general FAO information. We could at some point collaborate and link directly to the Canadian Soil Survey. If I tap, then I'm on the report. So I've got two tabs up here. One says report, one says data input. On the report side, I've already got some information here. So again, I've got that. I tap near the same location, so it's those same soils. These will now persist on my phone. The only thing that you need a data connection for to use LandPKS is to actually access that soil information, and then obviously to upload your data. But everything else works offline. All this information you're seeing here stays offline. There's also some climate information here. Pretty basic, just from a general global database and so forth. I can now move over to the data input side, and this is where you see these four modules show up: the land info, the land management, soil health, and the land cover. And again, it's designed to be super simple, and all these fields are optional. So for example, for inventory, you know, if it's my own land, I'm not going to bother noting that it's cropland on here. I kind of already know that. Maybe I'm grazing crop residues. Maybe I'd like to note that for that location. Don't need to. Slope, I can choose from a picture, or I can go ahead and actually use the phone itself. And I'm now just holding the phone up and keeping it parallel here to the slope outside my window. And I've got a 5% there. And now what I'm going to do is do what a soil scientist would do if they were going to come out and identify your soil. And I'm going to go through this, essentially a key. Now I could just select something, so I could select a sandy loam, but here where it says guide me, I can actually run through a key, answer this set of questions, and if I'm not sure what that means, there's a question mark here, and I can tap on that and it brings up a little video. So for those of you that learned how to do soil texture in university and haven't done it in a while, this is what we're going to use to identify your soil. Does it form a ribbon? Again, it gives you a little picture of that. How long is the ribbon? There's more pictures. And then how does it feel? And again, there's another video there. So I come up with a sandy loam and I say, all right, I'm going to use that texture. And rock fragment volume, again, I'm just picking from the pictures here. So we'll go ahead and grab that. And actually I'm gonna go here, and then I go down to the next one, and just for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna just grab a few textures here, and show you how it works here. So let's say we just got straight sandy loams. I realize this is not real common where most folks are probably, but just for the illustration. And now I can go back and I can, if I'd like to, I can record soil color. And again, I can do this in centimeters, or I can switch under the settings here, and we can switch to inches. So if I go to application settings, I can switch to English. If I'd like to, as I move further east in Canada, I guess I might want to switch to French. My French is a little rusty from high school right now, so I'm gonna stick with English. And so I go back then to my soil color, and I hit start. And essentially what I'm going to do is just take a picture. And I'm going to take a picture of my soil, which in this case is my desk, and a color reference. So something that I know what the color is, or the phone knows, my app knows what the color is. And when I tap that, and this happens to be a 3M Post-it note, and then I tap my soil, it's going to use that reference, the 3M yellow Post-it note, and it's going to determine the color of my soil. So again, for those of you who are familiar with the way that soil scientists do this, they use something called the Munsell. So the 2.5 YR 3-bar-8 is just a way of documenting color. And the app's going to use that information then when we get to the calculations. To do the calculations, we're essentially just hitting that synchronize button. It's uploading the data to the cloud. And what it's going to be doing is it's actually resorting this. So now when I go over here, here's my soil as I've entered it. And based on the location alone, the most probable soil is an orthic grazin. When I go to data, it re-ranks all those soils, and it says, actually, that's much more similar to a calcic chernozem. So for that location in my field, it's identified and basically ranked them, and it's the same, the next most likely is a eutrophistisol, again, based on those. Now, if I had more soil color data, it probably would have ranked the eutrophistisol down further because, again, as you can see, that's those histosols have got a lot of organic matter. You guys are familiar with those. And so we're, and then I can also rank it based on the location plus the data. So basically, it's just giving you options on how to predict what your soil is. If all I have is the location, I'll use that. If I've got some data and I've got some good data, I might go there. And if I'm not so sure, go with the location plus data to kind of head. And I'm going to just switch quickly. I think we've got somebody who's not muted here. And come back in here. Oh, looks like they muted themselves, so we can go back to the demo. So now I can go back and we'll go back to the same plot. And so that's the first module, the land info. There's more things in there, things like soil limitations you can record. It'll actually calculate your USDA land capability class, so the 1 to 8 class system used in the United States. And I'm sorry, I meant to do research on this. I can't remember if it's used in Canada. It is used in New Zealand and Ethiopia, Tanzania, a number of other countries, Costa Rica. But anyway, by answering these questions and then using the soil data, it basically provides a classification of the land. The next module then is land management. And I start by simply defining the area of the field. We have not incorporated a map into this yet. We may at some point in the future. There are lots of map applications, and so what we've done is we just tied our observations to a point, and then of course if you are monitoring, you'd call that point by the name of the field, assign it to some sort of a spatial unit. And let's say I've got a 50 hectare field here, and in the future this first year cultivated will be used for some of the carbon modeling estimates. Let's say 74. It's that data is simply for your records now, but it will be used in the future for carbon modeling. I can then go to the calendar, and basically here I can either select dates today, in the past, or in the future. So let's say I was doing a bit of planning, and on Saturday I'm going to be doing some irrigation. I've got some well water, and I'm going to be applying, and we'll say 2 centimeters add. I can add that again. On the future, of course, I can't add rainfall, but I could record rainfall today. And we find this is actually one of the most useful things is just having a quick way to just keep track of rainfall. You open up the app, you tap on land management, you tap on the date, and you can record that we got 23 millimeters today. And then if it rains again later in the day, I might add another 5 millimeters and so forth. Again, my plantings, we've tried to keep this pretty simple initially. Not a huge number of choices, but enough, or probably not. Let's go with oats, to get things started. And we will continue to add more in the future, and we're certainly open to requests and suggestions for the kinds of things that we add. This is an interesting one. You'll notice that we're actually providing 3 options, only one of which is likely to be used in most of Canada, but it's because this app was originally developed for use globally and in Africa. So we wanted to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to record their things. So on down the line. I won't spend a lot of time here going through that. It keeps track of it here. I can go back anytime, review what I happen to do on that day. Did I do any irrigation on that particular day, and so forth. I can also go back and go back to that report side, and I can open that up and go to land management, and I can get a summary based on a start and end date, or I can just download a PDF version for everything that I've input. So basically converting all this to a paper document if you'd like. You can also download it digitally from our data portal on the website. The next couple of modules then are our 2 monitoring modules, and we've tried to keep these as simple as possible. So with soil health, and I was just on the phone with NRCS, we will be expanding the soil health module in the future to address some of the new requirements that they've got for reporting. Right now, you just tap on the calendar date again, and again, we're just recording really simple indicators here. For erosion, these are things that you can observe. Okay, we're not going to go out and measure erosion. But we've actually found in a lot of the work that we've done, both here and a lot of work in Canada, that these observational indicators are quite sensitive. Rills, gullies, and so forth. Compaction, first answering, is there one? If I say yes, then I can record the depth, the thickness, how developed it is, the extent, etc. Aggregate stability, we've currently got a soil stability kit in here, and it's described here. This is something that you can make in your garage. I think you can also still order them online. I believe there's a company still making them. In fact, I'm fairly certain. I think I saw it just a month ago, still online and through forestry suppliers and so forth. We will be adding a couple of even simpler aggregate stability measurements that, again, can be done in the field. And then soil smell, super simple, but one of the most sensitive indicators there is in a lot of ways. It's a little hard to come up with more than 3 categories that we can communicate with words, but another thing to keep in there. And again, with biological activity, we will be increasing your ability to add a little bit more refined information here in the future, but at least getting something in there. And then for soil tests right now, we've just included 3 fields, soil organic matter, pH, and electric conductivity. And the reason for that is that there's still a lot of debate in the United States, and I know in Canada, about what the best measures are for soil health. we will eventually be adding these as consensus emerges as a place for record keeping. One of the important things, of course, is to note which method you're using, and then, of course, the depths. And we don't define those depths in advance. We allow folks to decide what those are. pH and electrical conductivity works the same way. The last one then that I'll briefly cover is land cover. And this was designed originally for pasture and rangeland, but we found that folks are starting to use it for crop residue, or at least I've been told they have. We don't track folks' data in that level of detail, but for crop residue cover. And essentially the way this is set up, there's 4 transects. You stand in the middle of your field or the area that you're monitoring, and you pace out. We've suggested you pace out 5 yards or 5 paces. You could pace out 10, 20, whatever you want to cover the area. There's no real prescription here. And you pace out 5 yards, and you lay a yardstick or a meter stick down. I've got a yardstick pictured here now. And essentially what we're doing is at each point on that stick, we're recording what the cover is. Well, if I'm doing crop residue cover, I'm just going to use this herbaceous litter here. And at every point that I hit some crop residue, I'd record that. If I'd like, I can record height. Of course, I could use this for weed cover as well as a rapid assessment tool. These gap measurements, whether or not the stick falls within a gap, is more for rangeland where we start to get these large erosional cells. And then, of course, we can look at density values. So we can look at the species. We could name it, and again, we could use these for plantings as well if we'd like. So you can run through that, do as many as you'd like, and then what it'll do at the end is it will actually calculate and graph those data when we come back over on the report. Of course, I haven't generated enough here yet, but if I'd opened that up and I had actually done some entries, it would go ahead and it would calculate that for me. And then in addition to those 4 basic modules, we've got the ability to add photographs, landscape, pit, samples. We're going to rebuild this. We've gotten some good feedback from folks. They'd like a little, even more flexibility on how to upload their photos. We do upload those separately, but that's what that little cloud is there at the top, because photos are a little bigger. So if you're on a real low bandwidth, 3G or something, you can probably access the soil information, but you may want to wait to upload your photos. Notes, self-explanatory. And again, you see down here at the bottom of the screen, I've got it marked private. I could turn it off. I can turn it back on again if I just accidentally hit that button. So I think that covers the demo. I'm going to switch out and just switch back to a couple more screens here, and then we'll open it up for questions and see if my colleague Megan has got any additional comments as we wrap things up here. So this is a diagram that a group we're working together with on open ag technology development called OpenTEAM in the United States has developed. And this will be pretty familiar for anybody that's done conservation planning or any sort of planning. In this case, it's the model is focusing on carbon sequestration. OpenTEAM doesn't just focus on carbon, it focuses on a lot of things, but basically reduction in carbon. So they're looking for opportunities there where they can then sell some of the carbon credits. Based on those opportunities, we make the changes at the farm level, and identifying those opportunities, we might start by using land info, because knowing what your soil will tell you where the greatest opportunities are. Making changes at the farm level, then obviously we can start to track some of those changes in land management if we'd like. And again, for a larger operation, LandPKS is probably not the tool I'd use if I've got 50 different fields and rotation and so forth. But if for a smaller operation, or you just want to keep track of a few things, it's a good way to get started. And then obviously the monitoring, modeling, and measurement with the soil health and land cover. So with that, I think we can go ahead and open it up for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see everybody again. And again, you can just go ahead and speak right up if you'd like, or put your questions into chat. Before I do that, Megan, if you're on, have you got any additions? Anything I missed there?
No, thanks, Jeff. That was great. I look forward to hearing any comments or questions from the folks on the call.
David Long here from Canada, Manitoba. I think the Canadian soil ranking goes from 1 to 7, 1 being the highest quality for agricultural use, and 7 being very poor. So I'm not sure, it parallels your 1 to 8, it sounds like.
It does, thanks. And if you happen to have a link to that, I'm sure I can find it online, but that would be great, because we really are interested in making this as relevant globally as possible.
Hi, Jeff. It's Marla Rickman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thanks.
I'm a soil management specialist with Manitoba Agriculture, and if you Google the Canada Land Inventory, then that will give you the rating system. So it's our agriculture capability rating system under the CLI, or the Canada Land Inventory.
Super.
I can also link that information to you if you want.
Okay,
you want
thanks.
to be in touch later as well.
That'd be great. And if you've got a link, if you just want to paste it into the chat, and if anybody else is interested in following through, that's a good way to do it. You just click on the chat. Thanks.
Hi, Jeffrey. Thanks for the presentation. So you mentioned the app has been used to plan for carbon sequestration. I was wondering if you know of the app being used at all for tracking nutrient reduction or nutrient capture.
I'm not aware of anybody using it explicitly for that, but certainly the kinds of things that you would want to monitor, including your cover production and your management practices, are things that we do provide through the app. And in the on the land management side, on the fertilizer, in addition to being able to indicate the type of fertilizer you're using, whether it's inorganic or compost or manure or what have you, you're also able to record the nutrient percentage of the material that's being applied, in addition to the amount. So certainly most, and this is certainly not my area of specialty, but I've based on all the papers and modeling work that I've looked at, I believe that we are including most of that. And if anybody's got, takes a look at the app and says, you've got everything, but you're missing, this variable, or then please do let us know, and we'll certainly consider that for future updates. This is something that we're currently in conversations with NRCS on, Natural Resources Conservation Service here in the United States, is the ability for folks to start to use this to collect information that they can then feed in if they wanted to qualify for a particular program. This is not something that it's currently set up for, but because it has a lot of those functions, and because it does, although it was developed by USDA, the app is not an internal government app, so it actually does operate outside of government. We have had interest and certainly conversations with both NRCS and with private landowners about the possibility that it might be used that way, to allow folks to collect their information, and then if they decided to share it with a government program of one sort or another. And there are, of course, ways to develop the software, the back end of the software, in ways that do that. And we've not set that up yet, but since you're mentioning nutrient management, that's a question that often comes up. How can I collect my data and then choose to share it when I wish to? And that's something we're looking into. Other questions or comments?
Hi, Matthew Weens here with Manitoba Agriculture. Am I coming through?
Yes, thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, I just wondered thank you very much, Jeff. Fascinating stuff you're working on, and I'm curious about your comments about tracking carbon sequestration. wondered if you could say a little bit more about that. It's not really my area of specialty, but I've explored it a little bit, taken some soil cores, and realized how much I don't know about bulk density and how variable soil carbon can be. So I'm curious to know the level of precision that tracking could achieve with this.
Well, you're not alone in your confusion. In fact, I just got off my last call. It was with an OpenTEAM group talking about exactly this. What is the level of precision that we need? And in fact, we had someone on from industry, a company called Nori. It was interesting. Even the financial markets have still not quite figured out what level of precision they're going to require and how they're going to define that. So it's complicated for a number of reasons. One of the things that we suggest folks do, recognizing that getting a really hard and fast carbon number can be pretty challenging. Until you're ready to actually sell your carbon that you're sequestering on the markets, even simple things like using that soil color function on the phone to just document in which parts of the field you've still got a really dark A horizon topsoil relative to the subsurface, and in what areas it's not. So starting with some of these simple soil health observable indicators is a good way to sort of get your toe in without spending a huge amount of money on soil analyses. We are engaging with a number of different groups, including an ecosystems market initiative that's collaboratively led by various organizations, Noble Research Institute and Nature Conservancy and Soil Health Institute here in the United States. And they're working on developing a carbon sampling methodology that would basically provide that sort of guidance, where you'd be able to go in and use the tool, overlay the tool on your farm and provide some of that guidance. So I'm really hoping that within the next 12 to 18 months, we'll start to have some of these tools available that are open source, transparent, so that everybody can see. It's not a black box. How the number of samples required is being determined, and then how those samples are being combined to provide an estimate. So excellent question. It was a long answer because the answer is I don't know, and we don't know at this stage. Or at least we don't know well enough to give you a really good answer. I just check to see if there's anybody else on the call. Mark Liebig, if you've got any additional thoughts on that, or if you guys have actually maybe got regional recommendations you've already created for that part of the continent.
Hi, Jeff. Yeah, this is Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for the overview. And I apologize to our Canadian colleagues. I didn't realize this was tailored for Canada, and so when I looked at the invite, I thought, oh, this is a great chance. I've read Jeff's paper, but I've never had a chance to sit down and learn a lot. So this was great. Thank you so much for the overview. I guess I don't think I can provide any more insight on the carbon question, other than it's really complex. I might suggest that some of the land use features that you're recording within LandPKS may be very valuable. I guess I think back to the program that National Farmers Union had in the mid-2000s, but it was all based on whether the producers was continuing to maintain a certain type of practice, I guess. And so a lot of those things could then just be observational in terms of land cover and residue and so forth. So that's not a lot more insight, I guess, on that, other than it's incredibly complex and difficult. I do have a question though, Jeff.
Sure.
The aggregate stability measure within your observational indicators. So I've used the test that you've developed, and it certainly has its merits. But I wonder, Have you looked at any of the visual soil assessments that have come out of Europe? Bruce Ball's work, simple rankings that are they essentially aggregate macroporosity and rooting characteristics and structural attributes, and provide a fairly straightforward and simple assessment, and can be quantified on scale of like 1 to 5.
Again, yeah, that is in fact something we were talking on in the last hour, and we do expect to integrate some of those into the app in the coming months. And again, that'll be what we're trying to do is triangulate a little bit between on the domestic side in the U.S. Standards that NRCS has already established, and then working in some of these additional observational indicators. And yeah, we never intended that ag stability test that's in there would be even necessarily the primary one in the future. But it happened to be the one for which there's already a very large data set that people can compare to, and that was one of the other criteria. So yeah, the VESS is and some of the European, and actually I've looked at some that have been developed and used or adapted, I guess, in South America and also in Australia. New Zealand, of course, has been very active in this space. So yeah, and if anybody on the call, Mark, you or others, have one that they are particularly fond of and think has worked quite well, whether it's the overall system or a particular indicator as the one that you just indicated, please do forward those along to us, either through the chat here or by email later on.
Thanks, Jeff. That's really good to hear. I don't have any more specific recommendations on that. I know I've been working with producers in sort of adapting best for our more drier region, and it's been a great way to engage and educate. And so I think it's a good tool. So I'm glad to hear that that's part of the discussion you're having with NRCS.
Yeah, the whole idea of LandPKS is the app itself is supposed to be visual. And so we're really pushing. One of the things we struggle with a little bit is including photos in a mobile app that's used outside. So we've tried to go with line drawings wherever possible, just because they're easier to see. But yeah, definitely. So I've got a question here from Ann. Okay, that was Andrew, I hope it's okay. This was sent to me privately, but I think it's actually a question that a lot of folks, and I think that was just using the chat function, a lot of folks will be interested in. Can data from the app from a number of farmers be sent to a company involved in aggregating carbon reduction efforts from a number of farms, or does the data stay on everybody's separate phones? That's a really good question, and actually one that comes up pretty often. It certainly could be. We have not yet set up the app so that the farmer could direct the data to be shared with specific individuals, say a company, and obviously that would have to be on the individual farmer's end, so they would have to opt into that. Right now, we just have an on-off button essentially for privacy. Either you keep your data privately or you share it with everybody. And of course, if you share it, if you keep it private, you can download it and then you could share it that way, but that's a little clunkier than I think what folks are looking for, which is the ability to essentially opt into a system where you decide to share your data with a particular company, or maybe a couple of companies, or maybe the government, or maybe your neighbors. You're part of a group that's doing a lot of collaborative management and monitoring together, or perhaps a research group. You know, decide, and again, setting up that system is something that we've looked into. It's not something that we have done yet, but again, feedback from this group is helpful to help us assess what the demand for that is. Thanks.
Hi, Jeff. Jim here. I guess what I'm very blown away by what you folks are doing there and working with OpenTEAM. And it concerned me that there wasn't much Canadian participation. I guess the University of British Columbia, they're involved with it, but I guess the question would be, what would be the procedure or the ability of people to become involved with OpenTEAM and to be working in cooperation with your group there as Canadians?
You
I throw
bet.
the question out there, not that I could personally be involved, but how our province or our federal researchers or whoever that might want to be involved could be involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So OpenTEAM is, as reflected in its name, open, and we actually welcome participation, and it's rapidly growing from all countries. We've had some engagement from Australia. I've actually got some folks with some strong connections with Malawi who have been engaged with it, and certainly Canada is actually the only other country other than, well, that's not true, the UK with Rothamsted would be the two countries that are currently formally engaged, so UBC and Canada. There are a number of opportunities. One is simply starting to use the resources. Now we are just getting geared up. Essentially, OpenTEAM effectively now is a consortium that is evolving into a collaborative, and eventually will hopefully move into actually having a platform of sorts. So you can access all the tools. The website provides links, and it's an increasingly good place to go to find some of those things. In the future, certainly collaboration with these groups and even joining one of the working groups. So we have several working groups, one on methods that's dealing with some of these sampling issues as well as methods issues, one on human-centered design and how we design our tools and applications. And then we've also got farms that are being selected to basically test and roll out some of these technologies. And of course, you don't have to wait. You don't have to be formally a part of anything to use any of these technologies. You can pick them up and use them now, with the open source. In most cases, and certainly with LandPKS.
Is that the Farm Hub group?
Yeah, well, we're calling them the hubs, and we were calling them the hub farms, but some of them aren't farms, some of them are a group of farms. So we're calling them hubs, and then we've got a next tier down. It's called network farms. So these would be farms that are actively participating, but maybe not at quite the same level. And again, if you go to the website, there's a form there, I think, where you can indicate that you might be interested in that, and we'll be opening, I think, we're kind of doing a soft rollout now, but opening a more formal application process for that later in the year. I'm guessing probably early this fall. So
that's globally that you're setting up the network?
Well, this is something we're struggling with. Is managing all this as it, starting with the U.S. But I can't speak to this because I don't think an explicit decision has been made, but certainly Canada is already actively involved in OpenTEAM. So I would think that an application from a hub or network farm in Canada would be viewed quite positively. But maybe don't quote me on that in perpetuity.
So I guess one quick question: Regen network is involved in your OpenTEAM, and I guess they're trying to market ecological services, and I'm just wondering, if that is going to be. I know the farmers can sign up on their website or whatever.
So there are
part of the network too.
Well, so there are a couple of, and again, OpenTEAM is I think best thought of as a consortium. that is increasingly integrated, where each member of the consortium has parts of what they're doing that are directly connected with OpenTEAM, and then other parts that are part of their sort of independent and core business. So Regen Network, and I will acknowledge I've gotten to know several of the folks there reasonably well, but I in no way claim to fully understand their business model. Or their objectives, or all their objectives. They're involved in quite a number of different things. So I think, again, just sort of keeping in mind that OpenTEAM is a consortium, but not everything that every part of the consortium is doing is not necessarily a part of OpenTEAM. But in answer to your question about ecosystem services markets, OpenTEAM is certainly committed to supporting the development of those markets in order to appropriately compensate and reward producers for the services that they're generating beyond the farm produce.
Hi, David Long from Manitoba again. Is there a possibility down the line, perhaps, of including in the soil surveys the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi that are either dominant or present, and could that be added to the work as well?
So in terms of the soil health module, yeah, absolutely. We could certainly include something like that. And if you've got a specific suggestion or even a general one on how we might describe that as an indicator well enough for people to record it, we could definitely do that. And I'm assuming that's when you said soil survey, what you meant was the soil health module, or did you specifically mean like the Canadian and US soil surveys?
Just on the, when someone clicks on a location, that it would not only provide soil type, but perhaps dominant AMF in that region.
Oh, I had never thought of that. That's certainly something we could look at. Is there a database that's already available that, because basically we can display things that are available in national or global databases?
Not to my knowledge. There's other people on here with a lot more information than I have, but as we go forward, it's starting to look like soil biology is looking like it's king. And if we make it measurable, or at least noticeable, maybe people will pay more attention to it. And it might have a very big influence on the carbon sequestration.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And again, as these databases become available, we can certainly look into tapping into them. Another question here, and soil biology, yes, very much agree, is where we need to be going. Is there an option to tie the app's outputs to other software tools? And that is one of the objectives of OpenTEAM, is to make these tools interoperable and to allow you to move your data around. We do have an API, Application Programming Interface, which basically means that there is some ability already to move data from LandPKS into other applications. And of course, we're using other APIs to pull data, for example, from Soil Survey into LandPKS. For the question of exploring LandPKS as a technology to track soil changes over time with a local permaculture group, where should people be directed who want to start using the software to log data? They can simply go to one of the stores and just download it for free. And then on the website, excuse me. On the website, we will increasingly be providing training videos and so forth over, and hopefully putting those up in the next couple of months, if not sooner, to allow folks to who aren't as comfortable. The other option is just to hand it to if you've got a 15-year-old or a 10-year-old, and just hand them the app, and they'll probably figure it out for you. So. Great. Well, I think we're at the end of the hour here. I appreciate everybody sticking around. Jim, any final comments?
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. It's been a great presentation and good learning experience. Hopefully, we can all work together to help, mitigate and adapt our agricultural practices using these tools.